Today we are going to discuss the answers that Krishna gives to Arjun's question. Actually not question, questions. Do you remember how many questions Arjun asked Krishna? There were 4 in the shloka number 2.54. After a long time, Arjun had started speaking and he spoke to question Krishna on 4 aspects. And what were the 4 aspects? That Krishna, the person that you're talking about, the one you say is in transcendental consciousness, what is this person's symptoms? Ka bhasha? How does this person speak? Kim prabhashet? How does this person sit? Kim asit? Rather, this actually means how does he regulate his senses and keep them away from the sense objects, keep them from overindulging into sense gratification. And the last one was Kim Vrajet or Vrajet Kim, which meant that how does this person use his senses in this material world? How does it go about? How does he go about in this material world? For what purposes does he use his senses? How does he do it exactly? So these are the different questions that Arjun had asked. Today we are going to start with the answer to the first question in 2.55. But first let's say the prayers. Om Agyanitimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So let's quickly start with shloka number 2.55 to see what Krishna is answering to the first question that Arjun has asked, that Krishna, the person you're calling as Sthita Pragya, Samadhi Stha, what are the symptoms, Ka Bhasha, what are the symptoms of such a person? So Krishna replies, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atmani Evatmana Tushtaha Sthita Pragyas Tad Uchyate. Tad Uchyate. He is said to be, at that time he is said to be. What is he said to be? He is said to be Sthita Pragya. He is said to be a person with steady intelligence. So as we go on the shlokas, we see Krishna is going to use certain words which are very similar to the point of being almost synonymous. For example, we saw in the previous shloka, Sthita Pragya, person with steady intelligence. Pragya means intelligence. Then Samadhi Sthya, a person who has attained transcendental consciousness, complete Krishna consciousness. Here again he is saying Sthita Pragya, same as the previous shloka. Later in the next shloka he is going to say Sthita Dhir Muni, Dhir Muni, sober, steady, and Muni means thinker. So you see, all these phrases or words are almost synonymous, because when we talk of Pragya, that's a faculty of intelligence. It's a faculty that we employ to the intelligence of a person. So, time and again, Krishna is going to stress on us to have a steady intelligence, fixed intelligence, transcendental intelligence. By fixed or steady intelligence, he doesn't mean an intelligence which is fixed in this world, in the material world, in the material endeavors. He means an intelligence which is steady and is not affected by the ups and downs of this material world, which means the intelligence which is invested in the spiritual world, because only the spiritual world is eternal, has no ups and downs, doesn't change with time. The material world is always changing, always changing. There's nothing steady about this material world. So an intelligence which is associated with this material world, it can never be steady. That's the point Krishna is going to try to make again and again. So in this particular shlok, he's answering, as I said, the first question, what are the symptoms of such a person who has a steady intelligence? So Srila Prabhupada translates, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Then he is said to be Sthita Pragya. So what is Krishna saying? Krishna is saying that when a man gives up the desires, now that's the title of our session today too. Can one become absolutely desireless? You know what they say? They say desires are the source of all anxiety for us. Isn't it so? Whenever you think about, something that you did not achieve, that you wanted to, right? You always start feeling anxious about it. Either you lament or you hanker after a desire. Either you want to, attain something, or you are crying over something that you could not attain. So desires, as they say, are the source of all anxiety in this world. So what to do? Again, the same question I'm asking. Can one become absolutely desireless? Should we give up all desires? But Krishna is giving us a clear indication here that no, you cannot become desireless. That's going to be very, very artificial, because the soul or the Jivatma is a very active entity by nature. A Jivatma just cannot sit still, giving up all, all sorts of activities, all sorts of desires. You see, a Jivatma or a soul has to have desires. It just cannot be, it's just not possible that a soul becomes desireless. So Krishna is saying, give up those desires which are arising out of your mind, which means by the jugglery of your mind. But you should keep those desires which belong to your soul. And how are we going to differentiate whether the desires that we are having are because of our mind, mental concoctions, or these are the real desires of my soul? To differentiate between that comes the role of the intelligence, which has to be sharpened by reading the scriptures. The intelligence will be able to differentiate between these two only when we sharpen it, just like we have to sharpen a knife so that it cuts through clearly, whatever we are trying to cut. Similarly, here, if the intelligence has to see through or cut through the different kinds of umpteen desires that we keep having all the time. How many desires do we have in a day? Oh, well, what a question to ask. I think from the moment we get up in the morning, we just start having desires one after the other, because it's the nature of the mind to keep running. It's like a monkey. It jumps from one branch to another. It jumps from one thought to another. It jumps from one desire to another. Sometimes it tells us that I want to eat this. Sometimes it tells us that I'm feeling sleepy. Let's go to sleep. Sometimes it tells us I want to go out. Sometimes it tells us I don't want to study. I don't want to work. I want to go out for a movie. So you just try to I would say, sometime, someday, let's do this activity that consciously, I could say mindfully, but that could become quite a pun here. Consciously, let's try to see through how many desires are we getting in a day. You'll find them to be innumerable. And not just during the day, even when we're sleeping, the mind, even though our gross body is sleeping, which means our consciousness is not extending to the gross body, which means our eyes are closed, our muscles are not doing any activity, our brain is not showing much activity, brain as in. But mind is still working. You'll see most of the time that we are sleeping, the body is resting, but the mind is working. We call that the subconscious mind. It's taking you to different places and dreams. It's doing certain things, and it is actually handling certain fears of your life. So mind is always working, always. There's seldom a moment when the mind stops working and having desires. So you see, it is the mind's nature to think, to feel, and to will, which means to have desires, right? But the mistake that we make is that we think that the mind is us. Whereas the Bhagavad Gita explains us that mind is not us. Mind is also external to us, because we are not the body, not the mind, but the soul. So, any desire that belongs to the mind is also external to us, because mind is using your body to fulfill its own desires. It's just like a third person taking advantage of you to fulfill his own desires. How would you feel about that? Suppose you someday get a guest in your house, an unwanted guest in the house, and the guest starts ordering you, okay, tomorrow let's make idli dosa in the morning. In the afternoon, I want to go for a movie. And you try to retaliate, you try to protest and say, well, I have some very important work in the office, so I can't really take you to the movie. But he just, puts you down and says, no, tomorrow we are going to the movie. So he's exploiting you for his own enjoyment. Similarly, mind is not us. Mind is external to the soul. And therefore, it's like a third person who's trying to exploit us to fulfill its own wishes. And something, it's relentless. It's so cruel also. If something goes wrong because we listen to the mind in the first place, then it's going to scold you back and say, see, I told you not to do this. Just go back. It will never take responsibility for what it said. You see, mind is really not somebody to look up to. It is somebody to look down to. It's said that mind or the man is a bad master, but a very good servant. So if we take control of the mind, if we don't listen to all the desires that it is throwing up at us, one after the other, what is this, like a crazy ball that keeps jumping all the time. So if we don't listen to all those desires at all the times, we will be really much better off, because most of the time we are wasting our energy in fulfilling these desires which come out from the mental concoctions, as Srila Prabhupada translates beautifully. Manogatan, which means from the mental concoction. What is a concoction? Let's try to understand that. Well, some new combination that I make in the kitchen with some ingredients that I know about. I put this together, this and this and this together, and make a new sort of a drink or a recipe. That becomes a concoction, So similarly, mind actually keeps concocting. It takes one desire from there, one from there, and that mixes up the two desires and says, okay, one desire, I want to eat chocolate. The other desire, I want to drive. I want to go for a long drive. So just, gets the two desires together and says, okay, I want to go for a long drive to South Extension and have that ice cream, So these are the different kinds of concoctions that your mind keeps throwing at. If we become, again the pun, mindful of what mind is thinking and desiring all the time, we will be actually able to see through its very unreasonable desires at times, Sometimes it says, well, your exams are coming up, study hard, you have to top the school. Okay, you have to top the school, fine, you work hard, you are the topper in the school. So the moment you start patting yourself, a voice comes in, from inside. That's the voice of the mind telling you, well, school is just okay, but then I think next time you should try for topping the whole town or the city or the district. Okay, then you say, fine, yeah, it seems right. Why should I become complacent about one of my achievements? It's not really a big achievement. I should try for something else next time, So then you start working hard for the next target that mind has set for you, right? Mind you, this desire for topping the town or the city or the district is not really yours, because the soul is a spiritual entity. It doesn't make material desires. Mind is a material entity. It makes all sorts of material desires. So when you get, you start working for the next goal, and, if you don't achieve it, the mind is going to keep you, taunting you about you didn't work hard enough. You should do something, you have to prove yourself next time. Things like that. And if you manage to achieve that goal, then again, good. But then, this is again not the end of the world. I think you should now top the country. You should top India. Then you should go international. You'll be the best in the whole world. So how many times have we seen that one desire of the mind gets fulfilled? We work hard to fulfill one desire of the mind, and the moment it's done, it throws another one at you. So mind is an entity which is never satisfied. It's like a deep, deep well without a bottom. Andha kuan, as you say, So if we waste our lives just trying to fulfill the desires of the mind as it keeps throwing those at us, we are going to be wasting this precious life in doing something that we were not meant to do in the first place. So as we have discussed, we were meant in the first place to find out about who we really are. Where did we come from? Where do we have to go? What's the goal of human life? How do we connect back to God? So we need to focus on the more important desires, which are the spiritual desires, because a very nice statement comes to my mind. It's not that we are material beings having a spiritual experience. We are actually spiritual beings having a temporary material experience. This material body, this material life is just a small speck in the ages and ages of lifetimes that we have spent. Ultimately, our real entity, real identity is the soul. It is spiritual. So if you're not thinking about the spiritual goals, spiritual desires, and only caught up in the material goals, temporary desires, as they say in Hindi, when you die, kya leke jaoge? Kuch bhi leke nahi jaoge. What you earn in this life, the gaadi, the bangla, the power, the position, the name, the fame, nothing is going to go, with you. So these are all the temporary things that you're always running after, but none of them is going to go with you when you leave this body. It's going to be just here, left behind. So isn't it little, wise that we start to think about the spiritual desires and spiritual goals, which are the real goals for a soul and which are going to be with the soul for all times to come. So even this bit of effort that we put in fulfilling a spiritual desire or a goal is going to go a long way for us, but not the mental ones. As Srila Prabhupada says, that it's rightly said herein that one has to give up all kinds of sense desire manufactured by mental concoction. And he also says that a person who may seem to have all good qualities but is not oriented towards spirituality, is not interested in finding about his spiritual identity and about God, he's really not a person, to reckon with. Or you can say he's not really a person who you can say to be possessing good qualities, because all these qualities that you see now, will run down sometime, because he is still using his mental concoctions to live his life by, So the point is that if you are using your mind to guide you through this life, then you are never going to reach the real destination. And that's what Srila Prabhupada stresses here, that a person who is a materialist, who doesn't know the real goal of life, always looks outside for enjoyment. He's looking for eating something, hearing something, looking at something, for his enjoyment. But the person who is a spiritualist, a person who is, on the platform of the soul, is always looking towards inside for the enjoyment, because soul by nature is a blissful entity. Soul doesn't need anything to become blissful and happy. So if we just turn our vision from out to in, on the soul, on the connection of the soul with Krishna, that is what is going to give us eternal bliss and happiness. A happiness that is never going to get exhausted. See, Srila Prabhupada is actually explaining so beautifully that the highly developed soul always remains satisfied in himself by realizing himself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. Because this is that relationship which when we resume, when we revive our relationship with Krishna, it is that relationship which becomes a source of constant and eternal happiness for us. And nothing outside in this material world can ever be a source of constant happiness for us. This is something we must all have experienced in our lives. That you get one happiness, but in no time you want something else to keep you happy. The older achievement, just goes away, as we just discussed, So, the person who is a Sthitadhi Muni is always happy in his natural position. He is looking inside. He's turned inside to his real eternal identity to become really, really happy. So, Srila Prabhupada also explains in this purport very beautifully that it's not easy to give up the desires, even the mental, the desires which arise out of mental concoctions, because they have become so much a part of our lives. We have become so used to thinking of ourselves as somebody who is actually the mind itself. We think we are the mind. If my mind is saying that, then this is okay, because who is mind? Mind is me. But, Srila Prabhupada says that we can give up these desires of the mind, which always aims at sense gratification, out in the material world, by investing our senses in Krishna consciousness, by engaging our senses in Krishna consciousness, which means our eyes cannot stop seeing something beautiful. You cannot ask the eyes to, the Gandhi ji ke teen bandar, just close your eyes. You can't do that. The eyes need to see. The nature of the eyes is to see. But what we can do is, we can change, we can shift the desire from seeing something materialistic, temporary, and ultimately not that pleasing, to something which is eternal and, I would say, always pleasing, a permanent source of happiness. So if we see the beauty of Krishna, the beauty of Krishna's temples, the beauty of Krishna's Shringar, so we can still see something beautiful, but this is eternal happiness. This is bliss, pure bliss, because this is never going to end. There's no reason that we will stop feeling the happiness that comes from, seeking a connection with Krishna. So, we need to hear something nice. We can hear some beautiful kirtans. We can hear beautiful chants, because the moment we start to practice hearing these beautiful chants and the holy names, we will see how much pleasure and bliss this gives us. When we get up in the morning and chant our rounds of 108 names of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, then what we see is that throughout the day the mind remains, or our self remains, in a state of bliss. Even if things keep going wrong around you, you still have an inner anchor, an inner stable environment that you can always resort to. So you see, turning your senses from outward temporary sense enjoyment to inward or enjoyment that comes from Krishna, an association with Krishna, is the best thing to do. Don't give up the desires, only change them. We can do that if our intelligence is sharp enough. This is just a small example. Suppose we have an important interview tomorrow, or an exam, and we need to be in our best, health in order to do well in it. And suppose you go out in the evening and you see an ice cream wala and you think, oh, I'm feeling so much like having an ice cream, although the weather is not that hot still, if the weather is changing, and if I eat the ice cream, I might get sick tomorrow, right? Now, if you listen only to your mind, you'll just go ahead and have it. But somewhere your intelligence just creeps in. Okay, if I can't, let me not have the ice cream today, because if I have the ice cream, I might end up being sick and will not be able to do well tomorrow. So let me just change my desire a little bit. If I need to eat something, okay, I can have a laddu maybe, or maybe I can have some hot halwa. So I can still enjoy myself, but not suffer because of it. So we can change, as we see, even the material desires, we can change, we can shift a little bit, because if our intelligence is strong enough, we can, do that. So why can't we change our desires from material desires to spiritual ones? It's not really difficult to do, but will give us wonderful results, wonderful returns. So with that, we come to an end of the answer to the first question that Arjun had asked. Next time, we will take up the next two shlokas which are answering the second question. Kim prabhashet? How does a person speak? With that, let's chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare